Bullies mock the quiet math genius, then freeze when he reveals his MMA champion secret. The halls of Westridge High School echoed with the familiar symphony of slamming lockers and teenage chatter. 15-year-old Noah Chen kept his head down as he navigated the crowded corridor, his slender frame easily jostled by the passing students. His slightly oversized glasses slid down his nose, and he pushed them back up with a practiced motion, clutching his calculus textbook tightly against his chest. Noah had transferred to Westridge just 2 months ago when his mother accepted a position at the local university. He was small for his age, with a lean build that made him look fragile compared to the other boys in his sophomore class. His quiet demeanor and exceptional performance in mathematics had quickly earned him the unwanted attention of the school's most notorious troublemakers. What no one at Westridge knew was that Noah's unassuming exterior concealed years of intensive mixed martial arts training. Back in his hometown of San Diego, Noah had been the state junior MMA champion for his weight class 3 years running. His grandfather, a former Taekwondo Olympian, had trained him since he was 6, but when they moved, Noah had promised his mother he would focus on academics and stay out of fights. She worried about his safety, especially after his last tournament had left him with a concussion, though minor. So Noah kept his talents hidden, choosing instead to channel his discipline into his studies. "Well, if it isn't calculator boy," the booming voice of Troy Wilson cut through the hall chatter. Troy stood a head taller than most sophomores, with broad shoulders from playing linebacker on the football team. His dark hair was always perfectly styled, and his expensive clothes marked him as one of the wealthiest kids at school. Flanking Troy were his 2 constant companions, Marcus Lee, a lanky basketball player with a permanent smirk, and Damon Reeves, stocky and aggressive with a buzz cut and perpetual scowl. Together they formed the trio that ruled the school's social hierarchy through intimidation and casual cruelty. Noah quickened his pace, but Troy's long strides easily caught up to him. A heavy arm dropped across Noah's shoulders, causing him to stumble. "Where you rushing off to, genius? Got another math test to ace and ruin the curve for everyone?" Troy's voice carried down the hallway, drawing attention from other students who slowed to watch. "Just keep walking. Don't engage. It's not worth it," Noah thought, his grandfather's voice echoing in his mind. The true warrior knows when not to fight. "I asked you a question, Chen." Troy's grip tightened, his fingers digging into Noah's shoulder. "I have class," Noah answered quietly, trying to slip away. Marcus stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "You know, I failed that last calc quiz because of you. Teacher expects everyone to be some kind of prodigy now." "That's not my fault," Noah muttered, eyes fixed on the floor tiles. Damon snatched the textbook from Noah's grasp. "Maybe if you shared your answers instead of being so selfish, we'd all get along better." He flipped through the pages mockingly before dropping it to the floor, where it landed with a heavy thud. Several students laughed as Noah bent to retrieve his book. As he reached for it, Troy's foot came down on the cover, nearly catching Noah's fingers. "Oops," Troy said with exaggerated innocence. "Didn't see you there." Noah stood up slowly, leaving the book under Troy's foot. His heart pounded in his chest, not from fear, but from the effort of restraint. He could feel the familiar surge of adrenaline, the instinct to counter and strike that had been drilled into him for years. He took a deep breath instead. "I need to get to class," he repeated, his voice steady despite the anger building inside. Troy finally lifted his foot, and Noah reclaimed his now dirty and slightly bent textbook. "See you at lunch, math boy." Troy called after him as Noah walked away, the sound of their laughter following him down the hall. Miss Patel, his English teacher, glanced up as Noah slipped into class just as the bell rang. She gave him a sympathetic look, but said nothing. Noah had noticed that teachers at Westridge seemed to maintain a careful distance from the school's social dynamics. They didn't miss what was happening, but they rarely intervened unless something escalated to violence. Throughout the morning, Noah struggled to focus on his classes. The confrontation in the hallway was just the latest in a string of increasingly hostile encounters. It had started with snide comments and mockery of his academic achievements, but lately it had become more physical. Accidental shoves in the hallway, feet stuck out to trip him, belongings knocked from his hands or hidden. By lunchtime, Noah's resolve to keep a low profile was wearing thin. He sat alone at the far end of a cafeteria table, picking at a sandwich while trying to read a physics textbook. He sensed, rather than saw, Troy and his friends enter the cafeteria, their loud voices carrying across the room. "Please, just leave me alone today," Noah silently pleaded, keeping his eyes fixed on the pages in front of him. But within minutes the trio had made their way to his table. Troy dropped into the seat directly across from Noah, while Marcus and Damon positioned themselves on either side, studying during lunch. "Man, you really don't have a life, do you?" Troy reached over and closed Noah's textbook. Noah reopened it without a word. "I'm talking to you," Troy said, his voice hardening as he snatched the book away completely. "Give it back, please," Noah said, finally looking up. Troy held the book above his head, well out of Noah's reach. "You want it? Jump for it. Short stuff." Several students at nearby tables had turned to watch, some giggling nervously, others looking uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. "I'm not jumping for my book," Noah said evenly. "Just give it back." "Make me," Troy challenged, a gleam in his eye suggesting he was hoping for exactly that. Noah remained seated, his hands flat on the table. The cafeteria had grown quieter, the scene drawing more attention. "That's what I thought," Troy scoffed. He tossed the book to Marcus, who caught it with one hand. "Probably can't even reach high enough to grab it anyway." Marcus flipped through the pages roughly. "All these formulas, what's the point? Not like you'll ever need this in real life." "Maybe he thinks being a genius will get him a girlfriend," Damon snickered, though he'd need a miracle for that to happen. The comment stung, but Noah had heard worse. He kept his expression neutral, years of martial arts training having taught him to control his reactions. But when Damon grabbed his lunch bag and emptied it onto the floor, something shifted inside him. "Pick it up, genius," Damon ordered. For the first time, Noah felt his resolve wavering. "How long do I have to take this?" A small crowd had gathered, now watching the drama unfold. Among them was Ellie Ramirez, a quiet girl from his calculus class who occasionally smiled at him. The look of sympathy on her face made his cheeks burn with embarrassment. "What? Are you deaf now too?" Troy leaned across the table. He said, "Pick it up." Noah stood slowly, but instead of bending down for his scattered lunch, he looked Troy directly in the eye. "No." A murmur ran through the onlookers. Troy's eyes widened briefly before narrowing. "What did you just say to me?" "I said no." Noah's voice was quiet but firm. "I'm not picking it up." Troy rose to his full height, towering over Noah. "You think you're tough now, Chen? Is that it?" Noah felt strangely calm, even as Troy circled around the table toward him. For weeks he had suppressed his training, his instincts. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. "I don't want trouble," Noah said, "but I'm not going to be your punching bag anymore." Troy laughed, but there was a hint of uncertainty in it. Something had changed in Noah's demeanor, a subtle shift in how he held himself, in the steadiness of his gaze. "You hear this guy?" Troy looked around at the gathered students. "Thinks he's tough all of a sudden." Noah remained silent, evaluating angles and distances automatically, years of training making the calculations second nature. Troy stepped closer, his face inches from Noah's. "Last chance, calculator boy. Pick up your trash or what?" Noah interrupted, surprising even himself with his boldness. A flash of anger crossed Troy's face. His hand shot out, shoving Noah's shoulder hard. But Noah didn't stumble backward as expected. Instead, he seemed to absorb the impact. His stance solid? Troy's expression flickered with confusion. He shoved again, harder this time. Noah stepped back once, but it was a controlled movement, not the clumsy stagger Troy was used to seeing. "What's the matter, Troy?" Marcus called from behind. "Need some help putting the nerd in his place?" That was all the encouragement Troy needed. He grabbed the front of Noah's shirt with both hands, clearly intending to lift him off his feet. It was a move he'd done countless times to smaller students. What happened next left the cafeteria in stunned silence. In one fluid motion, Noah broke Troy's grip using a simple wrist manipulation technique, stepping to the side as Troy lurched, forward off balance. Noah made no aggressive move, simply creating space between them. Troy stared at his hands in disbelief, then at Noah, whose stance had subtly shifted. Gone was the hunched, defensive posture. Noah now stood balanced and ready, his movements efficient and precise. "What the hell was that?" Troy demanded, his voice less certain. "I told you," Noah said calmly. "I don't want trouble, just leave me alone." A few students had taken out their phones, sensing something unprecedented was unfolding. The cafeteria had gone completely silent. Troy lunged forward, throwing a wild punch aimed at Noah's face. With a slight tilt of his head, Noah avoided it completely. Troy's momentum carried him forward, and Noah sidestepped, using minimal movement to stay out of reach. "Fight back, you coward!" Troy shouted, his face reddening with embarrassment as his target continued to evade him without apparent effort. "I don't need to fight you, Troy," Noah replied. "You're doing a good job of making yourself look foolish without my help." Laughter rippled through the growing crowd of onlookers. Troy's face darkened with rage. He charged again, throwing a flurry of punches that met only air as Noah weaved and slipped with the practiced ease of someone who had spent years in the ring. Marcus and Damon exchanged glances, their confidence visibly shaken. This was not going according to plan. "Grab him," Troy ordered his friends, his breath coming in angry gasps. As Marcus moved in from one side and Damon from the other, Noah finally demonstrated a fraction of his true skill. With precise, controlled movements, he redirected Marcus's outstretched arms, using the taller boy's momentum to send him stumbling into Damon. Both crashed to the floor in an ungraceful heap. Gasps and scattered applause broke out among the students. Someone whispered, "Who is this kid?" Troy stood alone now, his friends scrambling to their feet with considerably less swagger than before. The balance of power had shifted palpably, and everyone could feel it. "What are you?" Troy asked, genuine bewilderment in his voice. Noah's expression remained calm. "Just a kid who's tired of being bullied, and someone who's been training in mixed martial arts since I was 6. He paused, then added quietly, 3-time state champion, actually. The revelation sent another wave of murmurs through the crowd. A few students were frantically typing on their phones, undoubtedly searching for confirmation of Noah's claim. "He's lying," Troy said, but his voice lacked conviction. Ellie Ramirez stepped forward from the crowd, her phone held up. "No, he's not Noah Chen, 3 consecutive junior MMA state championships in California. There are videos." All eyes turned back to Noah, who shrugged slightly, looking almost apologetic. "I didn't want anyone to know. My mom made me promise to focus on academics here, stay out of fights." Troy's face cycled through emotions, disbelief, anger, embarrassment, and finally, a grudging respect. He took a step back, raising his hands. In a gesture of surrender. "You could have said something," he muttered. "Would it have made a difference?" Noah asked. Before Troy could answer, Mr. Patterson, the vice principal, pushed through the circle of students. "What's going on here?" he demanded, looking between the boys. "Nothing," Troy said quickly, surprising everyone. "Just a misunderstanding. Right, Chen?" Noah hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just a misunderstanding." Mr. Patterson looked skeptical, but seemed reluctant to pursue it further without a clear complainant. "Well, break it up then. Lunch is almost over." As the crowd began to disperse, Noah bent down to collect his scattered lunch items. To his surprise, Troy knelt to help him. "You could have destroyed me," Troy said quietly, handing Noah an apple. "Why didn't you?" "That's not why I train," Noah replied simply. "My grandfather always taught me that fighting is the last resort, not the first one." Troy nodded slowly, a new thoughtfulness in his expression. "Your grandfather sounds like a wise man." "He is." They finished gathering Noah's things in silence. As Troy stood to leave, he hesitated. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About all of it." Noah studied him for a moment, then offered a small smile. "Thanks. That matters." The next day at school, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. Students who had never spoken to Noah before now greeted him in the hallways. During calculus, Ellie Ramirez asked if the seat next to him was taken. Even the teachers seemed to look at him differently, with a new awareness and perhaps a hint of respect. At lunch, Noah was surprised when Troy approached his table, alone this time. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his usual cockiness noticeably absent. Noah gestured to the empty seat across from him. "Free country." Troy sat down, fidgeting with his water bottle. "So, I watched some of your fights online last night. You're actually pretty impressive." "Thanks," Noah said, unsure where this was going. "Coach Daniels wants to talk to you," Troy continued, "about maybe joining the wrestling team. Said someone with your skills would be an asset." Noah raised his eyebrows. "I thought you were the star of the wrestling team." "I am," Troy said with a flash of his old confidence, then added more humbly, "but I could learn some things from you. We all could." They ate in silence for a few minutes before Troy spoke again. "I've been thinking about what you said about your grandfather's teaching, about fighting being the last resort." He looked down at his tray. "That's not how my dad sees it. He always says you have to come out swinging, show everyone you're the toughest right away." Noah considered this. Different philosophies, I guess. But in my experience, the people who are always looking for a fight are usually the ones with the most to prove. Troy nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe." He glanced around the cafeteria at the social hierarchy he had dominated through intimidation. "Doesn't really get you respect though, does it? Not the real kind." "No," Noah agreed. "It doesn't." Over the following weeks, Westridge High School witnessed a gradual but unmistakable shift. Troy still commanded attention when he walked the halls, but his approach had changed. The random acts of cruelty diminished. Younger students no longer pressed themselves against lockers when he passed. Noah found himself in the unexpected position of sometimes sitting at Troy's lunch table, where conversations occasionally turned to martial arts techniques or the philosophy behind different fighting styles. Marcus and Damon followed Troy's lead, their previous hostility replaced by an awkward but genuine curiosity. The wrestling coach had indeed recruited Noah, with his mother's reluctant permission. At practices, Noah often demonstrated techniques for the team, his quiet expertise earning him genuine respect. One afternoon after practice, Noah found Ellie waiting for him outside the gym. They had started studying together occasionally, a friendship slowly blossoming between them. "How was practice?" she asked as they walked toward the library. "Good. Different from what I'm used to, but good. I never would have pegged you for a fighter when you first got here," she said. "You seemed so weak," Noah supplied with a small smile. "No," she corrected him. "Peaceful. You still do. That's what makes it interesting. You know how to fight, but you choose not to, unless you have to." Noah thought about that. "My grandfather would say that's the whole point of learning. The confidence to walk away when you can, and the skill to protect yourself when you can't." As they rounded the corner, they spotted a freshman being cornered by two seniors near the water fountain. The younger boy clutched his backpack defensively as the older students loomed over him. Noah and Ellie exchanged glances. Without hesitation, Noah changed direction, moving toward the confrontation. But before he reached them, another figure stepped in, Troy, emerging from the adjacent hallway. "Problem here?" Troy asked the seniors, positioning himself beside the freshman. The seniors looked surprised. "Just having a chat with our friend here," one of them said unconvincingly. "Doesn't look like a friendly chat to me," Troy countered. "And this is my friend too." He placed a hand on the freshman's shoulder. "So maybe you should move along." The seniors hesitated, clearly weighing their options before muttering something under their breath and walking away. The freshman looked up at Troy with astonishment. "Thanks," he said shakily. Troy shrugged. "No big deal. They bother you again, let me know." He glanced up, noticing Noah and Ellie watching. A look of understanding passed between him and Noah, a quiet acknowledgement of the change they had both undergone. As Noah and Ellie continued toward the library, she bumped his shoulder gently. "Look at you, changing the whole ecosystem around here without throwing a single punch." Noah smiled. "Sometimes the strongest move is the one you don't make." "Your grandfather again?" she asked. "No, that one's all me," he replied with a quiet confidence that had been there all along, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to emerge. In the months that followed, Noah Chen became known at Westridge not primarily as the math genius or the MMA champion, but as the quiet kid who had shown that true strength comes in many forms and that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean raising your fists. The bullies had picked on the wrong kid indeed, but in the end, that mistake had changed not just them, but the entire school for the better.